February 2024. First bill up for our consideration, Senate File 44, limited mining operations. Let's just jump right into Senator Cooper. We're going to, interest of time, you have an interest in this, I have an interest in it. Let's just jump into your presentation of it first, okay?
Of the
Yeah, of limited mining operations.
the presentation of the bill.
Yeah. You can jump straight to your amendment.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the amendment on this bill. We've talked the bill through quite a bit, I think, but in interim, the county commissioners and the Wyoming Miners Association have asked us to delete the county commissioners' language out of the bill. Other than that, there'd be no other changes that they bring forward. So on page 1, line 7, it deletes it entirely. On page 1, line 7, line 8, I guess it is, line 14 are the amendments. You have the amendments in front of you.
Do you have a copy of those? The amendments?
Yes, he does. He has a copy also.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
And I've got one too, we'll bring up here in a minute. It's a little warm in here. Can you
It is.
just eat?
We're in there. We've had this discussion. Yeah.
Perfect.
So again, all it does is, the amendment does is delete the county language out of the bill and puts the bill back to its original form. And I think that's pretty much where we're at on it.
Okay, everybody have a copy of that. And I also have amendment 2 for consideration. I don't know if it conflicts. I'll pass this out real quick. Just had this developed this morning.
Thank you.
Generally don't like to do things this fast, but we're on a compressed schedule. Love these compressed schedules. Study it for just a moment.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, and looking at these two options, I'm a little nervous about just striking out all the language because I think, one of the purposes of the bill is to address some of the concerns that we're trying to fix in these sections. So I'm more inclined to look at your proposed amendment, Mr. Chairman. That's just my initial impression.
Okay. Go ahead, Senator.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I'm sort of inclined in the other direction, and the reason is the genesis of this legislation was effectively clean up to the LMO statutes from Department of Environmental Quality, and there was honestly zero, well, I wouldn't say zero, there was little that was contentious about that. It was at least directly on topic. So I think there were some objections, but at least they were objections specific to LMO policy and discussion there. The changes with regard to county commissioner authority were a recommendation from the regulatory task force, and so it was incorporated into this legislation, and it's become a separate contentious focus of the legislation. And it almost seems like it would have been ripe for a separate piece of legislation so that the debates could focus independently on that topic versus the LMO topic, as opposed to combining the two. I think in the interest of getting minerals committee's work done, get this bill moved along through the process and keep the focus on the details of our LMO language without threatening the bill's demise, it would be appropriate to just cut out, as Senator Cooper's amendment would suggest, cut out the details about engaging with the county commissioners. And I think that's what the Mining Association would like. I think that's what the county commissioners would like, just to clean the bill back up and put it back into its original form. I don't want to see the bill die. I want to see it work through appropriately, and I think that's the way to do that.
Senator Cooper, you want to weigh in?
I'm sorry.
You want to weigh in on this?
No, sir, I think, no, sir, I think Senator Ross has expressed my concerns very clearly. We want to clean this back up and bring it back into the original form and move it forward as such.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, this is on limited mining operations, the amendments, amending requirements for the commencement of limited mining operations, amending bonding notice and reports of requirements. Everyone's familiar with the bill from the summer work. Let's go ahead and open it up to testimony from either state agency or the governor's office. Go ahead, sir. Director, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. As has been mentioned, this bill was worked through the Joint Appropriations Committee in the interim. We can walk through the bill or just take any questions, whichever you
I'm
prefer.
going to have you give just an overview for those listening.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, and I'll ask Administrator Wentland to walk through the bill since he's been the primary one.
It's all
working on
yours,
this.
Mr. Administrator.
Mr. Chairman, this bill expands the existing aggregate LMO categories to all non-coal minerals with the exception of radionuclides. It adjusts the LMO bonding per acre rates and provides for a full cost bonding option. It grandfathers existing small mine permits and eliminates new small mine permit issuance after July 1, 2024 if the bill is passed and the effective date. Codifies mineral sales reporting, codifies LMO 5-year term renewal provisions, and codifies existing reclamation performance standards and LMO operations across the state. I'm happy to go line by page in line if you would prefer.
Just the overview, if you would, please. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Director, you have anything to add to that?
No further comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take further public testimony, and then we'll come back to our amendments. Thank you. Any others from state agencies? No further state agencies? Anybody else who'd like to testify? Mining, come on up. Go ahead. Introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kelly Little. I'm with the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming. AGC of Wyoming is appreciative to the Department of Environmental Quality and this committee for their commitment to reducing the burden of overregulation and finding ways to be more streamlined and efficient. They have thoroughly reviewed the statutes and identified common sense changes that will benefit both the state and the industries that work here. Like others, we are concerned about the language related to county authority. This bill has been the work of long hours of discussion and consideration, and we are concerned that if that language and policy isn't considered separately, that we could lose the good work done on the myriad of other provisions if this bill were to fail. One change on our radar in the bill is the change in the bond rates and the option to post a full cost bond. We discussed with our members their thoughts on this increase with inflationary considerations in mind, and also what is required if reclamation were to fall to the state. Our members are comfortable with the increase as we hope that this will assist the department in the performance of their duties. We feel it is a fair amount of increase and that will be settled policy for the foreseeable future. We're also supportive of the change to in the mine classification system and the removal of the small mine classification. Again, this is just reducing complicated policy and streamlining the statutes. We're happy to have had the opportunity to work with the department over the interim on this bill and appreciate all the effort of this committee. With that, I will take questions.
Thank you. Let's just check with Mr. Detai sitting by you. Do you want to add to her comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Travis Detai, Executive Director of the Wyoming Mining Association, and would basically echo what my colleague has said here today. Our interest from the larger mining sectors are this really does streamline the permitting process, and what it will do will allow some of our new sectors coming online, like our gold sector, eventually cobalt, nickel, lithium to get into production faster through the LMO process. And then once they hit that limit of acres, roll right into the general mine process where they have the public comment period and all that good stuff. Allows them in the meantime, as I said, to get into production, to start hiring people, to start developing that relationship with their landowner. And so we believe that's a good thing. And I will speak briefly to the language in question here today. We're really pretty agnostic on it. And we come back to, and whatever the will of the committee is, we want to see this bill pass. And if this language is going to hang that up, or, Senator Rothfuss, I think you said it best, we took a relatively non-controversial bill. And, when my county commissioners are mad at me, that creates a little bit of controversy. So, whatever the committee decides to do, our goal is to see this bill passed. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Thank you. Questions for either one of them? Either one of you, have you seen either amendment out?
Mr. Chairman, I just have heard heard about the Senator Cooper's amendment, saw it briefly when he came in.
I think we don't have the ability to print a copy now. I'm going to, hand yours over. I'll hand this one over. Come approach. And pinch the pen. I was just about to say that and then I hesitated. Okay. All right. Take a quick look. We're going to give you just a moment. Can you adjust the heat at all from your standpoint, from your computer? Yeah.
We have a hammer?
Comments?
Mr. Chairman, I would look at it, I said, this is the will of the committee. We don't want to see the bill, get bogged down in this. We want it to, the original stuff to go through. So we want to see the bill pass.
All right. Let's have you leave those up there, those copies up, and anybody else would like to testify? Would the director like to have a view of those amendments? Yeah, I got one more. Cooper's got one.
I don't know.
Can we borrow yours for just a moment?
I think he.
Oh, you got it there. You got them both. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, we don't have any concerns with the proposed amendment. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, we don't have any concerns with the proposed
Thank you.
amendment.
Appreciate you coming back up and checking your exercise today. Let's open it up further. Go ahead. State your name and.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lee Livingston, Park County Commissioner here representing County Commissioners Association. We had 23 counties that voted against this bill with the county language in it. We were in full support of the amendment offered by Senator Cooper, and I am just now getting my eyes on this other amendment.
Take a minute and look.
And Jeremiah's the one who probably should be looking at this, but
We're going to let you bump Jeremiah's decision.
beg your pardon, sir.
We're going to let you bump Jeremiah's decision.
Again, we're in support of Senator Cooper's amendment, and at first blush, I don't see any problems with this, but again, without diving into it a little bit further.
Speaking on behalf of the commissioners,
Yes.
right? Okay.
I will speak on behalf of myself alone. I'm not mad at Travis Seaside, so.
All right, thank you for coming
Thank
up.
you.
Appreciate it. Okay, further public comment in the room? Further public comment in the room? Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Jessie Defoe, and I'm representing Freedom Path 307 today. They're a conservative policy think tank, and their main work is to build a path towards a stronger Wyoming. And what they want to do is advocate for economic solutions. And we believe the Senate File 44 does just that. We want to commend all the work done through the interim. We think that this is a bill that not only opens up for Wyoming business to thrive, but really streamlines the process. And that's what we'd like to see happen. Anything that can reduce the regulatory burden put forth on companies to really say that we are pro-business for Wyoming is what we'd like to see. So we'd like to encourage that. We've also been watching the Regulatory Reduction Task Force Committee pretty close. We appreciate all their work. And the thing that I'd like to point out in a letter that they recently submitted at the end of 2023, when they referenced this work, is that it really accomplishes what the task force was set to do. And they said to reduce the regulatory burden on private businesses in Wyoming to recruit and retain economic activity within the state. And we believe it does just that. So just to let you know, there's lots of people who encourage this and would like to see this a possibility. And I'd stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Comments, questions? All right, there being none, anybody else in the room?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jeff Doherty, thank you so much. First of all, I will echo the comments of the previous speaker. Second, I want to let you know, I haven't read this, but listening to it just a second ago, I need to tell you that I do support Senator Dockstetter's amendment. And I would tell you that if there's one person in this room who is a true believer in planning and land use, it's me. I'm the former planning director for the community in question. If there's one person in this room who's a true believer in mining, it's me. Although I don't want to create a problem within those organizations. But I would tell you that the reason we're here today is because for a 10-year period, a family and potentially others weren't allowed to access rights that were afforded to them under the laws of the great state of Wyoming. And so we urge you to pass this bill in one form or another, but I would encourage you to consider Senator Dockstetter's amendment. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for
I have a
questions.
question for you, Mr. Chowdhury. I'll give you the floor in just a moment. The Cooper Amendment, does it come close to accomplishing what you would like to accomplish? You've got it there in front of you. I'll let you take a minute.
Cooper just deletes entirely, right?
Right.
So, Mr. Chairman, briefly, the Cooper Amendment, my concern with it is, let me back up one step. I would argue that if this bill passes in the form that it currently is in, that the rights of counties will not be diminished in any way. The Cooper Amendment attempts to make clear to counties that their rights are not going to be diminished. I would argue that in either scenario, the rights of counties are not going to be diminished. What Section B does is highlight the fact that members of the public have access to those statutes, and we're comfortable with additional language that says that counties are not going to be fettered in any way as a result of the passage of this bill. Does that answer the question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Senator Office. You're tracking both, I can see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm curious about the support for this language, because as it would read, looking at the B paragraph, I'm just making sure that I've got this right, and it looks like it. So right now, it basically says county commissioners cannot prevent LMOs.
Right.
The language in the chairman's amendment would shift that to read, nothing in this chapter shall be construed to allow any board of county commissioners. No, delete line through prevent, my apologies. Nothing in this chapter shall be construed to limit a county's authority to provide conditions for limited mining operations. It almost goes exactly the opposite direction in terms of its intent. One is just, it basically says that a Board of County Commissioners can provide conditions for limited mining operations. And if you're saying your concern is a circumstance where county commissioners have slow-rolled LMOs, I guess I don't understand why this amendment is favorable to that position.
Daughtery?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, that's a great question. I would tell you that even before this amendment, commissioners had full access to Title 18, which is the authority under which they're able to impose conditions. In fact, the very application that caused this amendment to come forward has about 17 amendments on it that would be the sorts of things that county commissioners would be concerned about. Hours of operation, fugitive dust, setbacks, visual screening, those sorts of things. And so what I'm understanding Senator Dockstader's amendment to do is to simply clarify. So the first clarification is the one we're asking for, which is to remind counties that they are subject to allowing applicants access to LMOs. The second one is an effort, I think, by the good senator to make sure that counties know that their rights are not going to be fettered, trampled, or otherwise undermined in terms of their ability to prescribe what happens with the use. So the first part of code is the part that allows the applicant access. The second part of this amendment allows the county commissioners to know that they can continue to impose reasonable conditions necessary to offset anticipated impacts. Does that help, Senator Rothfuss?
Senator Rothfuss?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It does help, but I think at the same time, it, for me, drives home the concept that this is 100 times more complicated than the other part of the bill, because I feel like we should spend an interim working on exactly the nuances to stress exactly what you say, recognizing that there was a belief that counties could prevent it. We're taking away that language, but we're clarifying language that shows that you can provide conditions for, and this becomes the bill, in my view. And I'm not saying it's a bad bill. Everything you said is
Mr. Dowdy?
appropriate, but that's my concern.
Go ahead, response to that.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I understand. And the last thing this family, this ranch wants is to fetter the rest of the bill, the great work that the committee's done. I would say I'd love a chance to visit with some of the county commissioners, because I think if I could spend a few moments with them and explain to them that their rights tomorrow are going to be the same as they were yesterday, it might give them some comfort. I don't know what they know.
Let's do this. Did you have a comment on this? Okay. I wish there was ample time to do all of that, but we don't. Anything else you would like to add?
I just encourage you to pass the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Members of the committee? Let's take any more public comment from the room.
Thank you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Shannon Anderson on behalf of Powder River Basin Resource Council. We are opposed to the bill in its current form, and partly because, so the main difference between small mines and limited mining operations is public comment and participation. So small mines have a lot of exemptions to parts of Article 4 of the Environmental Quality Act, but what they maintain is that there still is a public comment, public notice, opportunity for neighbors to weigh in, to express comments to the department. LMOs, on the other hand, are an exemption to a permit requirement under Section 401 of the Environmental Quality Act. And that means because they're exempt from permitting requirements, there is no public comment, an opportunity. And so we're concerned primarily about expanding the use of LMOs, and particularly for mining types that have never been regulated in the state before. Lithium, copper, gold, rare earths. We don't have any of those mines right now. And to automatically exempt them from public comment and participation is very concerning to us. So we would encourage you to hold this bill back, maybe study it a little bit more, think about the consequences, particularly to neighbors of these operations, what that means for them. And then coupled with the Article 18 part is equally problematic, because not only are you exempting public comment requirements at the DEQ side, now there's no process at the county side as well. And so typically in an LMO situation, sand and gravel mine, again, there's no public participation at the DEQ side. And so typically neighbors to those operations show up at the county. And that's where actually you see some of these conditions imposed at the county level, because the DEQ doesn't have the ability to impose those conditions. The public doesn't have a process. So that's why the county process is so important for LMOs. And I would say too, counties now, as we had this conversation in Gillette, counties can prevent LMOs right now. They have that ability. And they have that ability because LMOs currently are with the surface estate. They're sand and gravel. They're not dealing with the mineral estate. And with that, there's an ability of the county to actually prevent them under current land use planning law.
Questions? Ready? Further questions? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Any else? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Era Arano, Wyoming Outdoor Council. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I support much of what the previous speaker said and just a couple additions. Without the ability to have a say in this process through the lack of public comment, neighbors' property values, their operations on their land, and their quality of life can be directly affected. Yes, we care about private property rights, but that's all private property rights, including those adjacent. We share the concern about the particular metals that haven't fallen in this category before and would ask that at a minimum, metals such as gold, silver, copper, and rare earths should be excluded until we know more, because the potential for contamination with heavy metals and acid mine drainage is just too great. Thank you. I stand for questions.
Thank you. Questions? Questions, committee? Go ahead.
On that last aspect, though, it would be my understanding that separate permitting would have to come through DEQ, and that a lot of those permits would potentially have a administrative process associated with that process. And so my thought is that while it's not covered directly under the LMO, you can do almost nothing with regard to either changes in land quality or changes in air quality without going through those processes. So do you find those processes to have insufficient input, or basically, can you comment on that aspect of it?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss. The lack of notification, because this isn't a permit, and the lack of those plans, we find problematic. I can get back to you after speaking to some of my colleagues on more of the details in terms of how that goes once it expands.
Further questions? Being none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further comment in the room? Further comment in the room? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Nick Agopian, I represent Teton County, would stand in support of the bill with Senator Cooper's amendment, pulling the language out specific to counties. That's under that, I believe it's the Title 18. Unfortunately, I can't speak to the long history that has been brought forward where some of this occurring in Teton County. I'm just new to this, but we stand in support of the County Commissioners Association position in opposition to this bill. If it does not, if that language is there, the concern is using this bill to limit local control potentially. So with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Nick? Nick, you're off easy. Further comment in the room? Let's go to internet, Zoom. Who do we have? Okay, go ahead and identify yourself and continue.
Yes, Chairman Dockstader, Senators, Liz Brimmer for the Wyoming Hereford Ranch. And to be brief, please pass the bill out today. We support it wholeheartedly and certainly don't intend any amendment, any interim work or any amendment today to slow that down. It's a very important bill, and we support your efforts there. Without going into any belabored detail that you heard in the interim, there was a process interruption. There was sort of I guess, putting a permit in a drawer for a period of time. It saw fresh air and the light of day through an interpretation that later happened. And so we have the permit in hand, and if there is work in the interim that you'd like to do, we fully support that. But for the sake of being expeditious and prioritizing the bill, whether it's Mr. Chairman, your amendment or Senator Cooper's amendment. We're humbly supportive of whatever your process is. We just needed to raise that there are property issues at stake. There are private property issues and rights. And affirming those is important, especially in a bill like this. It's also important per your amendment to affirm the county's authority as well. So we saw that as a win-win, and we would defer to your good judgment. Thank you.
Ms. Brimmer, I have a question for you, and I realize you may not be up to speed on the Cooper Amendment, but do you think the Cooper Amendment would take care of the private property issues as you see this bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I do not, but I think if you did adopt the Cooper Amendment and then prioritize this discussion as in the interim, that would satisfy us. It's a discussion over the long term for many property owners and private property rights overall in Wyoming.
Thank you. Does the committee have any questions for Ms. Brimmer? None. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it. Anybody else out there on the internet, on the Zoom? Is that everybody? There's one more? That's it. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if we have time to have DEQ come back up and address some of the questions that I was asking.
Sure.
Briefly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're back on. Start with question one for our gentleman.
So I think the concern that was expressed is that we would be expanding the potential use cases of LMOs to include gold, lithium, other types of limited mining operations, and that there wouldn't be any oversight or any opportunity for public engagement, for neighbors to be engaged. And I just wanted to hear a little bit about what the rest of the process would look like. For example, if you started to do lithium mining in a limited operation, what would that look like from a land quality? I don't know whether there'd be air quality, there probably would be water quality. Could you provide a little bit of detail on what the rest of that process looks like?
Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make clear, first off, is that nothing in this proposed bill would affect the authorities under the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, or other requirements under the Environmental Quality Act for the state. And I'll let Mr. Wetland address the rest of your question.
Mr. Chairman, I think the best way to answer that is the way the bill is drafted. It provides a very logical sequence, moving from exploration to a prove up to a full regular mine permit. And if you move from the LMO process to expanding the operation or full development, you would have the full public process. I would also add that when we look at the universe of the small mine permits, you got about 134 of those on the books today, about 300 LMOs on the books today. And in my tenure since 2015, I've not had an appeal won on any of those. So when we look at that in the public process, we're just not seeing that engagement. That isn't there.
Senator, follow up? Continue on with your next questions.
Thank you.
And
And
just double check. Committee yet? No? Good. Continue.
so with regard to kind of the considerations of the neighbor, and I don't have the rest of the LMO statute in front of me, but with the limited mining operation, it's my recollection that we had some setback requirements before you could have an LMO operation, and that if you were trying to operate within the setback, then you had to go outside and get permissions. Can you remind us a little bit about what those neighbor protections and other protections are in terms of what is allowed with an LMO without having to go outside of your little sandbox?
Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, the answer to that is then the notification process, you do have a 30-day advance notification to your neighbors before you dig in. So your neighbors are going to know. The second part of that answer to that question is there is a 300-foot setback rule to an occupied dwelling. That is in 3511 401 E6 large capital A in statute already, that says you have to have written authorization from that occupied dwelling or structure in order to be able to develop. And it does cover a broader range. It's occupied dwelling, school, church, home, public building, park, et cetera, that's captured under that existing statute.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. That was the key. And if following this, you could kind of send us a little summary of that in an email, that would be great. Thank you.
Anything else? Good. Thank you. Well, you've got the headquarters up there? Nope. Okay. Gentlemen, do you have anything else to add before you go back down? Okay, thank you. All right, let's just do a little straw poll here. We've taken all the public comment. We've got two different amendments here. One encompassing Senator Cooper. I've got one, I think, that protects private property rights, but I just heard two from testimony that perhaps the Cooper amendment would move forward. Committee straw poll, let's just kind of weigh in here on what you see of those two amendments. Anything that you'd like to see in either one? Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And as I said before, I think going with the Cooper amendment at this time to get the bill through is an appropriate solution. And then going to what we heard from some in the room, working on this during the interim perhaps, and trying to come up with some compromise language that's specifically focused. I think you actually need to capture both what's in the bill and what's in your amendment, Mr. Chairman. And I think you need to find a little balanced language, but I think that takes a bit of work and creates tension where the bill without that doesn't really have tension associated with the county commissioners. It goes back to the core LMO issues. So I think just from a getting our job done standpoint, passing the bill without any Title 18 and then working on Title 18 revisions during the next interim is an expeditious way to go about it.
My other three senators. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tend to see it the other way. We worked on this in the interim, and when we took a vote on this, and I remember it distinctly in Gillette, what we're trying to get after is clarifying rights and allowing private property rights, private property owners to access their resources. And so that was kind of the broad purpose of what we were doing. So when I looked at, we had a choice in the interim, we could have done two separate bills, but what we voted on in Gillette was to include Title 18 in there as well. And if you read and track in the amendment as presented by our chairman, he's changing line 7, and I think this gets after it, specifying how counties and zoning regulations may apply to limited mining operations. Outside of the context of this bill, as you know, Mr. Chairman, I practice law, and I see instances where there's ambiguities in our statute. Sometimes our, local governments will sit on applications where people are trying to get some things built and some projects going. And I know it's a source of frustration, Mr. Chairman. So, I kind of see it the other way. I know it makes the bill a little bit more controversial, but at the end of the day, that's what the purpose of this bill is, to provide more clarity and allow us, these private property owners, to access what's on their property and develop those minerals. So that's my straw poll.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I'm reading the Dockstader Amendment, what I see is it gives the county commissioners the right to limit this LMO operation, and they can at that point put that in a drawer or kick it down the road, whereas removing the language actually brings the LMO forward and allows it to happen. So I see a potential for county commissioners to actually shut down an LMO with the language brought forward in the Dockstader Amendment. Thank you.
Senator Jones.
Chairman Dockstader. Okay, so I appreciate what Senator Cooper said, but I don't read it that way either. So I think my preferred thing would be your amendment, Chairman Dockstader.
So this, the straw poll leans us into that direction. Would somebody like to move that amendment?
I'd move the Dockstader. Did we move the bill?
Yeah. Oh, we got to move the bill first. Sorry. Thank you.
Move the bill.
Moved and seconded. Moved and seconded. Okay, let's take the bill and move the insert. Let's insert the amendment into it. Thank you, Senator Ellis.
I'd move the Dockstader amendment.
Thank
Do you
you.
want me to read that for the public, or?
Yeah, for those listening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I won't go over the conforming amendment on page 1, but it would essentially take on page 2, lines 8 through 10. For the sake of ease, it would just read, nothing in this chapter shall be construed to limit a county's authority to provide conditions for limited mining operations authorized under WS 3511-401E Romanet 6 in accordance with this chapter. And then on page 3, the inserted language beginning on line 16, that part would now read, nothing in this paragraph shall be construed to limit a county's authority to provide conditions under WS 18-5-201 through 18-5-208 for limited mining operations authorized under this paragraph.
Thank you. Staff, good? We're good? Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this? The comment on the amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay?
No.
I think I got a 3-2. Raise your hands. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay? 3-2. Amendment passes. Back on the bill. Any further amendments on the bill? Any further conversation on the bill? Take roll.
Do you have a comment?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm probably going to oppose this bill based on the fact that I stand beside my county commissioners and my county commissioners' recommendation. And as such, I'll be a no vote on this.
Thank you. Any further comment? Your comment? I'll offer comment. I think we're still leaning into the side of private property rights, which I think is a very important thing for us to do in this state. And so I'll be an aye on the bill. That being said, if there's no further comment, roll.
Senator Cooper,
No.
Senator Ellis,
Aye.
Senator Jones.
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
No.
Chairman Dockstader.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 3 aye and 2 no.
Thank you. We're going to weigh down on Senator Ellis again to help us on the floor with this. One more for consideration, folks. Do a little housekeeping here. I was thinking we had one more day. We don't, so we're going to adjust things. We're going to hear this bill today, the mineral royalties proportional severance tax refunds. And I've asked for a Wednesday morning meeting to take care of solid waste trust and bank and the reduction task force. And Senator Roth says he has people that will come in for our lunchtime meeting. Is that correct? Yeah. So Senate File 5152, synthetic median stable token, will be at lunch. So those of you beware, if you got some other meetings going on, we're going to take care of 3 of those bills, 80, 96, and 131 in the morning, and then move to 51 and 52 at lunch, and then we play by all the rules. With that being said, we've got one more bill for our presentation, mineral royalties proportional severance tax funds. We have a presenter on that one. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here. Good thing we have these committee rooms right next to each other. We can just hop back and forth between the two. But this is an old friend, Mr. Chairman, sponsored by your select Federal Natural Resource Management Committee in response to the federal decision to increase our royalty rates for oil and gas producers. It also anticipates a similar move against our coal producers as well. And so the idea here is that first, it's important to understand the effect of that federal decision on our revenue streams. It's pretty clear to me that the intent is to disrupt our oil and gas producers on federal lands, but unfortunately it also puts its thumb on the scale for decisions that are normally reserved to the Wyoming legislature, especially how we distribute funds to one constituency or another. So I guess I'll start there. The effect is obviously we increase the federal mineral royalties, but we also see a decrease in severance tax and ad valorem tax, since these taxpayers do deduct their royalty rates from those two sources of taxes. So you see a fairly significant impact potentially if these leases all move to the new increased royalty rate of 16 2/3%. And I just think that it's important to provide stability during a time of quite a bit of uncertainty for our oil and gas producers. It also has a partial refund based on the fact that we do get only half of those federal mineral royalties back to the state level. The feds keep the other half, roughly speaking. And so we give the affected taxpayer basically a 50% refund based off of the increased royalty rate that they're paying. So it partially reduces the increase, only by half though, that our oil and gas producers are feeling, and it makes state and local government whole as well. So that's the general idea. It's a focus on.
Mr. Chairman, could you explain that reduction to me again so I understand it?
So for severance and ad valorem
Yeah,
taxes?
yeah. Trying to
Yes.
follow track your reduction.
Yeah, sorry, I'm moving probably too quick here. So it's, so the royalty rates that an oil and gas company pays, those are deducted from your severance taxes and your ad valorem taxes. And so the effect of increasing the federal royalty rate from 12.5% to 16 2/3 is you reduce the amount of taxes that are being paid to those two revenue streams. So, that has an effect for any entity that is dependent upon severance taxes. It has an effect for your local counties, for your any special districts that rely on ad valorem out in the county. And so that's what the bill does as well. It provides stability for those entities that would be negatively affected by this federal decision, in addition to offering a partial refund for the affected taxpayer.
Thank you. Committee questions for the chair? Mr. Chairman Boner? No further questions? Oh, go ahead.
Actually, I guess just trying to walk through an example on that reduction for the severance side of things. If the federal royalty rate goes up, and just so that I'm tracking what you're saying, the federal royalty is taken off the top, and you're suggesting that the severance is taken off as a percentage of the rest as opposed to a percentage of the base. Is that accurate? So if arbitrarily, let's just say it's $100 is what we're talking about a barrel. Are you suggesting that the severance tax is not taxed on the $100? It's taxed on after the federal royalty reduces that $100?
Senator Boner.
Right, so let's take a before the federal action example and an after. The impact of your royalty rate on that $100 per barrel. Previously, they'd paid $2.50 per barrel in severance tax. With this new one, they'd pay 16 2/3, and that would reduce and so there'd be a corresponding reduction in ad valorem based off of that.
Mr. Chairman, no, I don't know that directly addressed it. So again, if you've got your base of $100 in both circumstances, the mineral royalty, the federal royalty rate of 16 2/3 comes off of that, or it's 12 point, is it 4 or 5? What is it currently? The current federal royalty rate?
It was 12.5%. Now it's 16
12.5. My apologies. So 12.5. So previously, then it was 87.5, and now it's 83.3. After that, are you suggesting that we are taking our ad valorem and/or severance on the 83.3 instead of 87.5?
That's correct. It functions
Senator.
similar to a deduction, say, on your income tax.
All right,
Clear?
Mr. Chairman, it's clear, but I thought that was the case potentially for the ad valorem, but I didn't think that was the case for the severance. So
Senator?
I'll just have to look into that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's something we realized. Actually, we had to have an extra meeting of the select committee 2 or 3 years ago because we didn't fully realize the extent of this impact. And we had to amend it. Like I said, it's been 2 or 3 years after staff and Department of Revenue did a little bit more research. But certainly if we want to get even more technical than we're at, I'd probably defer to the Department of Revenue. But this has been thoroughly vetted by Department of Revenue, by your county treasurers, because you have to figure out how to distribute those impact, to make whatever local entity, and there's over 400 different types of, or areas that have slightly different, property tax rates depending on the special districts and everything. But yes, this has been vetted over several years by Department of Revenue and your county treasurer. So,
Mr. Chairman, on that, then, just to be clear, the method or the vehicle for making the local communities and the other funds whole is out of the increase in the federal mineral royalty portion, 50%, 48%, that comes to the state of Wyoming, a portion of that then is intercepted and redirected to keep in-state whole. Is that
Go
accurate?
ahead.
That's correct. And in your bill, you see that we basically take the portion we get back, the delta between what it would have been and what it is now. We cut that in half, recognizing we only get, or not quite half, we only get 50% back. Then we further reduce it by 25%, recognizing the fact that the taxpayer is not paying as much in both those severance tax and ad valorem. So it's it's reduction after reduction to account for all the effects.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, a separate question. So all that makes sense, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate learning today that severance is taken out beforehand. That's news to me. On the credit to the producer side, this is my only point of concern, is the credit to the producer and the need for that. I understand the producers would like it. Who wouldn't like, I'd like it, direct it to me. That'd be great. Probably won't pass. But at the end of the day, if this is a nationwide policy, it seems to me that the only way that there would be effectively a negative consequence from it is if all the states started doing exactly what we're doing and we have a race to the bottom. And are other states already implementing a similar policy so that we're trying to race with them to the bottom?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, not to my knowledge, it seemed the only state that is similarly situated would be New Mexico. I'm guessing that idea like this would not be too terribly popular in a place like New Mexico, just for political reasons. So I think that oil and gas in Wyoming is at a bit of a disadvantage for several reasons. Part of it is the federal nexus. Other parts are remote nature. And so you can see it in the rig count. I mean, before COVID, we're at 25, 30 now. Last I checked, we're below 15. So I think that it's no mystery that the current federal policy is hostile to oil and gas, and it's clearly having an effect just based off some basic observations.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
but is it not correct that and I haven't checked in the last few weeks, but our production is probably the highest it's been in many years statewide? Is that not accurate?
Response, Senator?
Since the 80s, late 80s, 90s?
I would have to check that, but I was mostly going off of rig count. Certainly that's a testament to the sophistication with which our operators are now developing. And
Exactly.
certainly you can
Let's do this. I have
Thank you.
a sneaky feeling the professor's going to double check it.
right,
So
fair
any
enough.
further questions? Any further questions? You want to follow up with anything?
No, go ahead. Thank you.
All right. So Senator Boner, we're good?
I believe so.
So check for public comment. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, anyone in the room would like to comment on Senate File 64, mineral royalties, proportional severance tax refunds? Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Craig Grendick, the Administrator of the Mineral Tax Division, and I'm really here just to answer any questions the committee may have.
Questions? Community questions? Go ahead.
I'll just ask briefly. So it sounds like that was all right. It was well vetted, and the ad valorem, both the ad valorem and the severance are calculated after the federal mineral royalty is taken out. Is that accurate?
Yes, that calculation takes into consideration how much of the refund is really attributable to those pieces for each of the county entities and the severance tax as well. When I say that, it's really accounts, right? Accounts that money flows in and out of. That lack of money coming in through the assessed value because of the increase in federal mineral royalties, that's accounted for in the bill.
So, Mr. Chairman, so the assessed value, though, I mean, when I think of the assessed value, I would naturally think that if the oil sold for $100, that's the assessed value of the oil. But what I'm hearing is, no, it's not. The federal royalty is discounted from that prior to doing the calculations, which I guess surprises me and almost seems like we should push back against the feds on that, because the valuation should be seemingly the true valuation. But am I perceiving it accurately? No.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. If it's $100 that was received by the producer at 12.5%, $12.50 would be reduced from the assessed value at 16 2/3, $16.67 would be reduced.
Okay, one quick follow-up. And do we do that then with royalties going to private property owners and the state as well?
Mr. Chairman, the federal mineral royalties are a component of a class called exempt royalties, which are state, federal, and tribal. Private royalties are not, do not reduce the taxable value.
So, Mr. Chairman, so we exempt the state royalty on state lands, we exempt the federal, tribal, but we do not exempt individual taxable or
Mr.
individual
Chairman,
property owners.
Senator Rothfuss, that's correct.
Well, that sounds fair. Thank you.
You could keep track of that all the time, huh? Thank you. All right, very good. Any further questions? Let's go have you come up if you're going to, and thank you for being here, sir. Appreciate it. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Tom Kropatch, I'm the State Oil and Gas Supervisor for the Oil and Gas Commission. I don't really have any major comments, just a couple maybe to help clarify some of the comments I heard. Senator Rothfuss was correct. Our oil production this year won't be the highest since the 80s, but right below. 2019 was the best year we've had since actually probably maybe even going into the 70s.
But I was thinking about a radio broadcast out west that had that.
And just briefly on that, it looks like, I mean, there was the precipitous dip from COVID, and it looks like we are just now recovering fully from that. So this year will be almost identical to that 2019, and then it's still continuing the upslope. Is that your understanding as well?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Rothfuss, will be just a little below, I think. We'll probably end the year just under 96 million barrels of production for 2023. We still have the December production to be reported. And I think 2019 was right around 100 billion barrels. So we're down maybe 5% still from our high.
Gotcha.
But our rig count is low. I haven't looked this morning, but last week it was at 11. And the reason our production is still increasing in 2023, even though towards the end of the year here, towards the end of the 2023, we saw a decline in rig count, was that lag time between drilling the well and completion and getting it on production. So I expect we'll see our production to continue to grow for the next 6 months, but if we don't see a rig count increase this summer, it'll probably start to decline by the end of 2024.
Is there a time of year the rig count goes up more?
Mr. Chairman, usually the summertime and early fall, the rig count is higher.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
And then, Mr. Chairman, one other comment I had related to the royalty rate is there's limited leases at this point that are under that 16 2/3 royalty rate. The leasing has been slow in recent times under this administration, and so that royalty rate is for new leases coming out, not the existing leases that are still at the 12.5, and so it'd be limited, for a while until we see more leases under that new rate and leasing pick back up
Let me just
again.
double check. Senator Rothfuss, any oil and gas questions? Back to you, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you. Do you think that's going to put kind of a premium on the prior leases that are already leased in place, where since those are effectively going to be leased at a lower royalty rate, that those will be premium leases, so to speak, rather than new leases? I mean, is that a dynamic that's unfolding?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I think it really depends on production of the leases. So it depends on where they're at. And, there's so many leases also held up in various lawsuits. And depending on the outcome of those, new leases in the Powder River Basin that are interspersed with the fee and the state would be those areas where they're drilling the horizontal wells are the ones that are at a premium, whether they're at the lower rate or the higher rate. If you can get the lease issued and drill it, and you're in the Powder River Basin where activity is really focused right now, I think that's probably the premium.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Revenues in the House, would they like to say anything? Are we good? Apparently not. Okay, let's go ahead. Continue with the public discussion. Got a few more minutes.
Era Arano, Wyoming Outdoor Council. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would refer you to the Wyoming Infrastructure Authority report of 2018, where the state studied the severance tax issue. As a state, we concluded that higher tax rates do not discourage exploration and production, and it depends more on geology and the quality of the resource. Royalty rates on some state lands in Texas are double ours, and they still drill. especially at a time when this rate is the same across all federal minerals and with so many other variables, most of them out of our control. A few percentage points in tax rates will not impact our drill count. I would draw your attention to the fiscal note. 3 years ago with this bill, the fiscal note stated that the quote, "the non-administrative fiscal impact is impossible to determine. Last year and this year, it predicted eventual costs in the hundreds of millions plus the administrative costs. Because of volatile markets beyond Wyoming's control, we can't know the fiscal impact of this bill in the long term. All we know is that the fiscal impact will grow as more leases qualify. When considering the bill's administrative costs, this bill is an example of spending money to lose money, an effective double whammy of administrative costs to incur more costs. We do not think this is a wise use of our resources. When major companies operating in our state post record profits, these profits go to out-of-state shareholders and executives. This bill does not increase extraction. It does not benefit Wyomingites. Let's not harm ourselves just to send a message to the feds. Thank you. I stand for questions.
Missed it. You had a cross-reference with Texas. What was that again?
Their drilling rates for state land are more than double what ours are, their royalty rates.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Questions? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Further comment in the room?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shannon Anderson on behalf of Powder River Basin Resource Council, and we have opposed this bill in various forms for the last 3 years. Our organization supports responsible development of our mineral resources, and part of that responsible development is ensuring a fair return to taxpayers. The federal royalty rate had not increased since 1920, since the original Mineral Leasing Act up until 2022. So it was just modernizing the rate. That's all it did. And as we've discussed today, just refunding that back to the oil and gas companies isn't going to increase production. It's not going to increase the rig count. It's not going to bring in additional tax revenue to the state. This bill is in better shape than it has been the last 2 years, definitely with the relationship to the counties and ad valorem. But we do believe it's bad public policy on the state to not collect the right revenue for our mineral resources. And that right revenue is a 16 2/3% federal royalty rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Wait, questions? Questions? Go ahead.
Ms. Anderson, I assume that your concerns are really kind of the bottom of page 4 through the rest of the bill, and that everything in the first part of the bill that relates to levelizing distributions is probably perfectly reasonable in your view. Is that fair?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, that's correct. We would take no position on that first part of the bill.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, any further comments in the room? Any further comments in the room? Go ahead, Mr. Detai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Travis Detai, Executive Director of the Wyoming Mining Association. In the interest of time, we support the bill.
Any questions for Mr. Detai? That easy. Thank you. Any further comments in the room? Further comments in the room? Do we have anybody on the internet, on Zoom? Let's have a little discussion here. Committee, what's your thoughts on this legislation coming out of Federal Natural Resources Management? Mr. Chair, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I like the first 4 pages of the bill. And
After that?
not particularly enthused about the rest of it, which is the refund back. I understand it, but
You want to take a stab at changing it in the committee, or?
yeah, I think so. I would just ask Senator Boner about Section 3, because I don't
Senator Bonner,
know.
Step back up, please.
I don't know what, it's the $368,000 appropriation. It does not make it clear to me what that is for, so I don't know whether that goes with the first 4 pages
Senator?
or not.
Right, and so it's since we're talking about amendments, it's important to point out that that appropriation is one time for the Department of Revenue to update their software to accommodate this new policy, but the whole policy would be enacted by the producer applying for the refund, and everything else spins off of that. So it would be quite the substantial change to only redistribute our FMRs among severance tax and ad valorem. the whole idea is that we're not going to increase the ongoing cost of government. We're not going to have additional personnel and Department of Revenue. We're simply going to let the producers apply for the tax refund and let that drive everything else.
Okay, thank you. Everybody clear on the money? Go ahead, Senator.
But I do have a question for Senator Boner. I guess I don't see why, and maybe I'm not reading it in enough detail, but based on my understanding and kind of reading through the language, it does seem like you could sever the bill at page 4, line 20 is the last line,
Got a
and
bill in front of you,
that
Mr.
stands.
You got a bill there?
That first part, without the second half, would still do what it's supposed to do, which is to appropriately distribute the necessary funds to make the cities, towns, and counties whole, as well as the districts.
Thoughts, Senator Boner? Absorb that for a moment.
Right, so initially I'd direct the committee's attention to page 2, line 16. Transferring a severance to the severance tax distribution account equal amount to the funds necessary to provide the refunds. So that's what I said, it's the refunds that drive the entire,
What line are you on?
that's what drives the redistribution to the severance tax account and that form to the counties.
That's how the math is done. Thank you, I see it now.
Okay, let's do this. Let's just, somebody want to move the bill and we'll go page by page? We got about 15 minutes.
Move it.
Move second. Move and second. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Any further comment? Call for the roll.
We have one comment.
Oh, go ahead. Hold it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to some of the comments from the public that said that this 4% wouldn't really have any effect on drilling plans or whether or not we would or wouldn't drill a well. I'd have to differ with that. If I can get an additional 4% return, that completely changes my rate of return and can actually, based on time value of money, can actually greatly impact total economics of the well. It seems like a small amount, but put over time, it's a very significant amount, and I think it's prudent to move forward as we are.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman. I'm just noticing that that's why you're successful in business. You scratch it out on your notepad just that fast. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'd note that based on my understanding, it would just be the state side, so it would just be the 2.08% unless there's an additional makeup. So relatively small, and then it's half of that, so it's 1.04%. That is actually the differential that would be felt by the producer, and then that other half of the half would be available to the communities. I do think that the community part is valuable, but again, the idea that we're trying to do this race to the bottom, I'm really worried that other states will start entering into this game, and then what we have to do is bid down and start paying to have people play in the state of Wyoming. As we heard from Mr. Kropatch, for example, and this wasn't directly what he was commenting on, but talking about selection, it's going to be based on kind of where the oil is, where you've got an operation, what the leasing is looking like. And we have done studies on this in the past. The legislature has seen a number of these studies, and the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, in fact, has worked on this in the past. And it's pretty clear that geology is the key. That's the deciding factor, much more so than the specific tax climate. As long as they're roughly comparable, nobody's spending a lot of time figuring out what the taxes and what the royalty rates are to make their decisions. So I think it's just giving away money. It's a free money to oil producers, and particularly at this time when they're often reporting, $25 billion profits in a quarter. I don't feel like they're in dire need of our few dollars that we're using for education.
We're into the vote, so I'm not going to let you back in, Senator. I want to appreciate it. Any further comments? Further comments? Strong comments? Take roll.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator Ellis,
Aye.
Senator Jones,
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss,
No.
Chairman Dockstader.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 4 aye and 1 no.
Senator Boner, you got the bill on the floor. Thank you. All right, folks, once again, for those listening, this is how we're going to spread it out. And this young man over here is going to find us a room Wednesday morning. If you've got a conflict with other meetings, then leave me a vote. But we're going to go Senate File 80, Senate File 96, Senate File 131 in the morning, and then Senate File 51 and 52, synthetic media and stable token at lunchtime to accommodate those traveling in. Questions? Let it be noted, and we'll put out the notice that way then. That's lunch, that's morning. Okay, go ahead and get the notice ready. Thank you. Any other work for the cause? Let's go ahead and adjourn, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you.
We're a big deal. Wednesday.